Hello everyone, hello dear framework heroes, hello dear front-end heroes. Let's answer a simple question today. How do we build a progressive web app on top of our favorite framework without locking ourselves to the built-in possibilities of this framework while still using the power this framework gives to us? My name is Maxim Salnikov, and yes, I came to you all the way from Norway today to present about progressive web apps. And just to emphasize the level of my commitment, I listed some of my activities around this. I speak, I hold workshops about PWA, run meetups, conferences. By the way, this is my Twitter. This could be useful for you because I will post the link to this slide deck right after my session. And you can even blame me with the fact that we have PWA logo. I'm not the author. Author is Diego from Samsung Internet Browser team, but I'm the, say, igniter and the facilitator of the idea of having a community-driven progressive web app logo. After all, what is this? And we'll refer to the definition given in Mozilla Developer Network. I believe you all know that this is the best source of the documentation about JavaScript and browser APIs. So basically, this is just the fact that we use the latest and the greatest possibilities given to us by modern browsers, right? And in ideal world, these possibilities work everywhere, not just only in all evergreen browsers, but on the operating system level on every platform, right? Why do we go for this? Of course, to delight our users, to give them the experience which was never possible on the web before, which is close to some extent to the experience native apps give to us. But I mentioned about ideal world, right? Let's go back to reality and let me give you the latest updates about the level of support of PWAs in modern browsers. Browsers, it's all good here. So I'd say that it's more than enough to start building your PWA right here, right now, just today. So all the major evergreen browsers support at least basic features of Service Worker API, which is engine, which is heart and brain of progressive web apps idea. Mobile platforms, both major platforms are there, and Android is a golden standard. In that sense, it's really hard to distinguish native app from PWA on that platform. On iOS, some features are possible, at least to have offline experience, with some drawbacks though. Desktop operating systems love progressive web apps. On Windows 10 and Chrome OS, progressive web apps, so our web apps, are first-class citizens for platform itself. And also, using the special flag, you can install your web app as an almost native app for other operating systems like Mac, Linux, and Windows again from Chrome browser. So, having a look at this level of support, I call this year, 2019, year of PWA. And I truly believe that this level of support will improve and will improve fast. Okay, let's go back to the frameworks and let's answer another question. What do they give to us? And answering this question, let's not take this figural stuff like they give us good developer experience, efficiency. No, let's give just direct answer. So we created some app using our favorite framework. We built it using corresponding CLI or some build scripts. What do we want to get as output? Something that our users will load and run in the browser, right? So basically this is some set of files, HTML, in the JavaScript, CSS, maybe some images. So what do we need to call this set of some resources, some files, a progressive web app? And let's talk about the minimal requirements. First, we have to provide some knowledge to browser or operating system about this app, what's the name and what icon to use if we want to call this app after all, right? But that's simple. We just create a simple JSON file which is following web app manifest specification, and there are decent generators and helpers for us to create this JSON file. So this is not our main focus for today. What's way more interesting is application shell. The again minimum requirement to call our app a progressive web app is to have the UI of our application loading not dependent on the network conditions. So offline, or if we are online, we can optimize this experience dramatically. Let's check what do modern frameworks give to us in that sense. And to limit somehow our today's scope, let's just take top 3 of them. So React, Angular, the latest version, and Vue. I know that there are other great frameworks with PWA features. I know that there is a plugin for Ember, and there is, say, template for Svelte called Sapper. But let's give some limit. React. SW, which is service worker, is driven by so first, it's really interesting. It's the only framework in our top 3 which generates progressive web app by default. We do not call this create React app a CLI, right? This is just a script, but still, if we go for this, we'll get PWA out of the box, and service worker is driven by SW precache, which is a nice library, but not under active development anymore. Out of the box, we have all we need. It's quite challenging to configure this. I'm not challenging, but maybe not very developer friendly. So we have to find this webpack configuration, do some changes there. And it's really bad in terms of extending. By extending, I mean, for example, having our own service worker and having full control on that. Now, my question to you. Do you love breaking news about your favorite framework like I do? A couple of days ago, and on this screenshot just some hours ago, actually it's not a couple of days, for my time zone it's just 1 day ago, there was a major update of Create React app, which made everything I listed here not true anymore. But I'm used to have something like this right before my session, so no worries. We'll go back to this in a few moments. Angular. We create progressive web app for the new or existing app by applying schematics called Angular PWA. As a service worker, we have 100% Angular native solution called Angular Service Worker. Really nice set of functionality given out of the box. Good in configuration, of course, limited by the scope of this Angular Service Worker, but really awful in terms of extensions. So it's just no way. And Vue.js. We create PWA or add PWA features this really similar way to Angular, but in terms of Vue.js, it's called not schematics, but plugin. library is Workbox, and actually this is our today's hero, which gives a nice set of functionality out of the box. It's good in fine-tuning this configuration, and again, not very developer-friendly in terms of extension. It's possible to have your own service worker. This is what I mean by extending PWA functionality. But again, it's not enabled by default and not very friendly. And go back to create React app version 2, which was released on October 1st. It follows almost the same scheme now. So they switch from SW Precache to Workbox, which is successor of SW Precache, and approximately the same options. So now we can say that built-in support of PWA have some strong sides and some weak sides, of course, like everything in our world, right? Obviously, all frameworks try to do this integration as seamless as possible. This is why it's really easy to start with this. But as a result, we always limited by some configuration options, and it's difficult to impossible to make our service worker custom or flexible enough. In addition, it's not always convenient to add these features to existing apps. So this will kind of force us to go for some custom solution. And the last point from this red list is we use more than one framework in our work. This is according to the same survey, State of JS. So most of us use more than one. So let's specify some requirements we want to have in our, say, dream PWA of our favorite framework. First of all, we want to automate the main task. So this is all about that, right? So this is why we even started this discussion. We don't want to write the code to put something to the cache, to validate cache, to serve manually, right? That's the whole point. At the same time, we still want to keep full control on how that works, right? And which extra features we could add. On the one hand, we want to have it as framework agnostic, right? To use our experience for any other frameworks for our next projects. At the same time, we still want to have the integration with the framework. And last but not least, we want to have our deployment process as friendly as possible. Okay, now we can create a plan. What will it take to organize a pattern called application shell? Let's just build it virtually. First, what is this at all? This is minimal set of resources, files we need to show some meaningful in terms of application UI, right? So this is something that we want to have even in offline. And in case of online, we want to serve this immediately from some pre-cached storage. So our framework generated some output for us in build or dist or you name it folder. So we have this list of the files. Most likely not all of them are good to pre-cache, right? So we need only minimum set, as I mentioned. Next, we would like to not just have the list of these files, but also their hashes. We'll need this a bit later to maintain the versioning. On the first load, we take these files in our service worker code and want to put them into cache. This is our plan. On all next loads, we ask service worker to serve these files from this cache. Don't be confused, this is not HTTP cache. This is very special request response storage we have in all modern browsers. Now, at the same time, while we serving them from cache, or at least trying to serve them from cache, we would like to know if some of these files were updated, because it's our application after all, right? And it evolves. We fix some bugs, we introduce new bugs, so we build versions one after another. Why do we need this? Then on the next load, on n+1, in that sense, we can serve these updated files from the cache. There is a small comment. It's a well-known trade-off of progressive web apps. When we do our best to serve this application shell immediately without even pinging the network, we do this check on updates later. So we serve the previous version, right? This is why at this point, we would really love to inform user that something was updated. Just some pop-up, some toast, you name it, and give the possibility to do this next load in more explicit way. So we can split all this flow, and which we don't want to code manually, into some steps. First, build time to generate this list, to process this list. Second, all this caching and serving and checking and all that magic. And after all, the way we can hook into this event, right? And this is the good point for me to reintroduce Workbox, which we already mentioned in context of Vue.js and now React. So this is PWA helper library or libraries. It's separated into modules, which helps us, libraries help us to have some really nice set of functionality really out of the box. Just mentioned application shell. So all this magic with caching and serving and validating the cache. Next, runtime caching, another type of network optimization. It's for the cases when we don't know what do we want to cache exactly on, say, on the first load time. It's good, for example, for caching of our API requests, right? We don't know which sections of the app will our user go after all. Really magical feature to replay requests which were made during offline. And based on that, just one liner to introduce and have offline Google Analytics. So we can get all the information about user actions while they were online. Connection of service worker and our app to propagate some useful updates. And in addition to all this, we still can keep full control on our service worker. So we still maintain and code and control our own service worker file, which we extend by this functionality. Workbox is working in three main modes, as a CLI, as a Webpack plugin, and as a Node module. And taking into account our requirements, we'll go for the last option. So what are we waiting for? Let's just go and install Workbox build package, and we will need this only during development time. Now, time for coding. Let's just go line by line. This is our service worker build script. We will use inject manifest mode from Workbox build in a few moments about what is it. We'll provide some configuration, and after all, we'll call this inject manifest method. But wait a sec. What do we mean by manifest? What do we mean by injection? By manifest in that sense, again, don't be confused with web app manifest. We mean the list like this. So basically, this is a list of resources we want to have as an application shell. Again, this is minimum set of files we need to run, to show, to render some UI, for example, in offline mode. So how do we know which files to take? This is where configuration comes to play. By specifying some globes, we provide the knowledge to Workbox build which files to take. I listed only basic options. It's really flexible. So now we know what we want to inject, but where do we want to inject it? Here in our source service worker, the one we actually have as our own one, right? So let's have a look how this service worker file could look in its simplest form. Service worker JS. First line, we import Workbox library itself, which gives us all this magic. And here the precache and route method, which contains empty array, as you see. Exactly here we inject this list by just calling this inject manifest method. So just simple file operation. So we cover this first build step here. Where is the second step? Where's this magic with caching, serving, validating? Here in that method. So again, it's absolutely transparent for us. And now we can organize integration with our build flow. So this is Angular as an example. We build our application itself, and then we call this script to build, not in that sense, not to build from scratch, but to modify our service workers to inject the list of files we need. So we have kind of update chain. We updated our application files. Based on that, we have this list of resources updated. And based on that, we have service worker file updated as well. Of course, the whole point of having our own service worker is to extend it, right? So this is why it's so important. And in addition to this magic precache and route method, which gives us all this application shell features, we can, for example, use the same Workbox library to organize runtime caching. In its simplest form, we provide some URL pattern, API in my example, and strategy, network first in my example. And we can have our own listeners. So service worker is based on listeners, right? So in that case, we listen for push events to display notifications, for example. Good. But we forgot one important thing. Now we have our application files ready, and we have service worker file ready based on this application files. Time to connect them. In its simplest and naive form, it will look something like this. Simplest, but still powered by feature detection. Of course, this is not what we want in our production app. So again, let's have some requirements. Feature detection. This is absolutely must-have for service worker registration, and most of functionality we use in service workers and in PWA in general. This is how it works. It's about progressive enhancement after all, right? Next, it really makes sense to postpone this registration for, I don't know, as far as possible. Just not to compete with the main thread for the network resources, for the processor time. Again, service worker is something that enhances our app, but it should not regress it, right? And you remember we had this point number 3. So we would really love to hook into the event when service worker itself was updated. That fact means that we might change like behavior of our application quite dramatically. And at the same time, if service worker updated, most likely it means that some files in the application itself were updated, just because we recalculated their hashes. Why do we need this moment again? Just to remind you, to provide better user experience in form of this pop-up message. Again, this is a kind of trade-off of application shell pattern. So what could help us in having all these requirements? One more library I would like to introduce you, called Register Service Worker. The name is self-explaining. By the way, it was created by Evan Yu, a creator of Vue.js, and obviously this library is in use in Vue.js for the registration of service worker. But you remember that we took Angular as a guinea pig for us. So let's find the proper moment where to use register method exposed by this register service worker library. In case of Angular, you remember that we want to do everything as the very final step after our UI is ready. So we can catch this moment as a promise resolve of Bootstrap module. But this is specific to Angular. In other frameworks, you have to find the moment when UI is ready. So we call this registration, which already includes feature detection and postponing the registration until all resources were loaded by just using window load event. But how do we catch this moment when service worker was updated and most likely app itself was updated? This method, register, exposes some useful callbacks for us, and one of them called updated. And in my very naive sample, we just show native confirmation window asking, informing our user about the newer version of application is ready to be served. Do you really love to like explicitly update it now? And this is where we have step number 3 of app shell. So now we have the full flow of application shell covered by our, say, framework agnostic and flexible and still integrated solution. As a conclusion, just some tips and tricks for you while you go for service workers. First, trust everything that you want to cache. If any single resource that you try to put into cache during this application start is not available for some reason, the whole service worker registration will fail, which is not crucial for our app, should not be crucial, right? It's progressive enhancement. It will just not delight our users by these nice PWA features. Be very careful when you try to cache something from third-party servers. In most cases, there are no course headers set up, which put some serious limitations on how service worker work. And after all, try to keep your service worker always fresh. In the latest specification of service worker API, browsers should not use HTTP cache for service worker at all, but not all the browsers are there yet. So just to make sure, it's always better to have this server header specified for our service worker JavaScript file. So, I wish your service workers always be fresh and healthy, and sometimes we need emergency case to start from scratch, to remove everything we had. So my last hint for you to always have service worker, which is kill switch, which is trying to kick the old one, which could be, for example, broken, and unregister everything and start a new life. So this is really useful to have this file when you which you copy over your say broken service worker. I invite all you to join PWA Slack. I mentioned we already more than 1,700 developers there, and it's open. You will find the link on my Twitter, where I post these slides. And with that, thank you very much.